If AI doesn't really think and understand, how should we think and talk about what it does? And what positive lessons can we learn about ourselves by comparing ourselves to it? What are some right ways and wrong ways to think about the relationship between AI and the human race? Hello everyone, I'm Michael Augros. I teach at Thomas Aquinas College and my field is philosophy. Welcome to the 10th and final video in this series exploring the question of whether an artificial intelligence can truly think and understand. Over the past 9 videos, we've covered a lot of ground. We've examined arguments claiming that AI does truly think and understand and uncovered their weaknesses. We've also looked at philosophical arguments that say the opposite, that AI does not truly think or understand. Some of those were stronger than others, and among the stronger ones, some simply showed the fact that AI is incapable of real thought, while others also offered insight into the cause behind the fact. In this final video, I'd like to complement the conclusion we've reached, that AI cannot think, understand, or perform any real cognitive act, by exploring 5 follow-up questions. First, how should we talk about AI? Should we stop saying it thinks or understands, for example? Second, are we inferior or superior to AI? Third, what's a fair way to name AI's relationship to the human race? Is it a tool, an assistant, a teacher, a friend? All of those? None? Fourth, what can comparing and contrasting ourselves with AI teach us or highlight for us about our own nature as cognitive beings? Fifth, will this AI wave promote or suppress the greatest human goods, things like friendship, freedom, wisdom, and the arts and sciences? After we've given some consideration to these questions, I'll close with a few final reflections. So let's start with the first question. Given that AI cannot truly and literally sense, think, or understand, does that mean we should stop using words of that sort to describe what it does? Should we stop using cognitive verbs when we talk about AI? I'd say yes and no, but mostly no. Yes, in this sense, when we're aiming for a philosophically precise description of what AI is actually doing, clarity and accuracy demand that we avoid describing their actions in cognitive terms. We have to say something like this: AI doesn't sense, think, understand, or perform any cognitive act in a non-metaphorical sense. Instead, it produces representations of things, or things that function as representations for us, and manipulates symbols and representations of concepts, or things we treat as symbols and concepts, and does so in ways broadly similar to how our brains process information. We can't articulate Searle's Chinese room argument, for example, if we insist on attributing cognitive actions to AI models throughout, even if we're consciously using such terms metaphorically. They'll only lead to confusion. Since the philosophical question whether AI can truly think and understand has been the main subject of this series, I've mostly avoided describing the actions of LLMs in cognitive terms. But outside that narrow context, we shouldn't stop talking about AI in cognitive terms. Even if it were ideal to avoid cognitive language when describing AI, it's too late. The habit is already widespread, deeply embedded, and there's no going back. And really, that's how it should be. Dropping cognitive language when talking about AI isn't ideal. For one thing, describing what AI does without using those natural cognitive metaphors is difficult, awkward, and clunky. Those metaphors are clear, brief, natural, and easily understood, if also easily misunderstood. More importantly, the metaphors are meaningful and instructive. After all, the whole point of AI is to imitate some aspect of our cognitive power. It's not just carrying out random mechanical tasks. It's specifically designed to mimic the kinds of transitive operations we rely on, what we might call our unconscious paracognitive computations, when we think and perceive. In this way, AI succeeds in producing results similar to the ones we achieve through genuine perception and thought. So, there really is a resemblance, even if it's limited, between what AI does and what our cognitive powers do. Refusing to use cognitive language to describe AI would not only be impractical, it would miss the point. The metaphors highlight a real similarity, not a false one. In calling cognitive terms metaphors when applied to AI models, I mean that the terms have been carried over from a prior thing to a new thing defined by likeness to the prior one. For example, lion, in its original and proper sense, refers to a large cat. That's the first definition. But when the word is used to mean like a lion in the first sense, that's a metaphorical use, as when we say Achilles is a lion in battle. It's not possible to explain what it means for Achilles to be a lion except by referencing his resemblance to the original thing called a lion, since he himself is not a lion in the original sense, hence a metaphor. Likewise, when we say an LLM thinks, we mean it does something like or related to our thinking, true thinking, but it doesn't actually perform any true act of thinking itself. Hence, we're looking at a metaphor. But that doesn't mean the metaphor is meaningless or that it's best to do without it. Pictures of objects aren't the same as the objects themselves, but we naturally call them by the same names. A painting or photograph of a horse isn't literally a horse, but it's still natural to call it a horse. If you point at a picture of your uncle and say, "That's my uncle," and I reply, "No, that's just a picture of your uncle," you'd be right to want to slap me. In general, an imitation or simulation of an original thing has to be understood and defined through that original, and so it's reasonable to name it after the thing it imitates. AI is a case in point. It's in some way a simulation of some aspect of human cognitive power, and accordingly, it should be named after it. So, no need to invent an entirely new vocabulary for talking about AI. As long as we remember that we're using metaphors when we say AI thinks or understands, what we're saying remains true and appropriate. Just like when we say a thermostat senses the room's temperature or a spell checker has learned a new word, except that there are degrees to this imitation. Large language models imitate our learning far more closely than a spell checker ever could. So much for the first question. Our second question is whether we human beings are superior to AI or inferior to it. Here we need to make a distinction. You may remember from video 9 that we covered the difference between what's true simply speaking or without qualification and what's true in some respect or with qualification. This distinction often matters when we talk about superiority and inferiority. For example, a sharp knife is, simply speaking, superior to a dull one. It's a better knife. But a dull knife is better as a stage prop. A habit of regular exercise is, simply speaking, superior to a sedentary life. It's healthier. But a more sedentary lifestyle is better for people recovering from certain injuries or illnesses. In the same way, we human beings are, simply speaking, superior to large language models. We're superior beings, and superior also in cognitive power. But they are superior to us in some very important and extremely useful respects. In fact, the particular respects in which AI models are superior to us are often more obvious than the absolute superiority that we possess over them. So let's start with their advantages. AI is better at answering questions or solving problems quickly. It's faster at processing data than we are. For example, some AI models can analyze millions of documents or images in seconds, something that would take a human being many years. AI is also better than us at performing its functions continuously. It's tireless, capable of consistent, fatigue-free work. And it's better than us at multidimensional pattern recognition. AI can detect subtle patterns across enormous data sets that human intuition or perception would likely miss. It can also achieve superhuman precision in certain specialized tasks, like medical imaging diagnostics, chess, or protein folding predictions, sometimes outperforming even the best human experts. These are superiorities in speed, accuracy, precision, endurance, the very things AI is designed to achieve. Without those superiorities, AI wouldn't be much use or hold much interest for us. So why don't these superiorities make AI better than us without qualification? For AI to be simply and absolutely superior to us, it would either have to be a better intelligence or, more generally, a superior form of being. But neither is true. That AI is actually inferior to human beings in cognitive power is clear in view of the arguments of the last few videos. Those arguments showed that while human beings and animals possess true cognitive power, an AI model does not, but only simulates a certain aspect of it. Hence, an AI model is said to have cognitive power only metaphorically, and what has true cognitive power is, of course, more cognitive than what only has it metaphorically. AI's power, although a very real power of some sort, isn't truly cognitive. We only call it that by its resemblance to paracognitive aspects of our own cognitive powers, by the similarity between the outward effects it can produce and those we produce by means of cognition, and by the fact that it enables us to perform cognitive acts we could not perform without its help. As I've said in previous videos, denying true cognitive power to AI is not the same as placing a limit on the kinds of tasks it can perform, or on those in which it can outperform us. It just means they don't perform the actual operations of sensing, thinking, and understanding, but other operations in various ways related to those. So we're more cognitive than AI models for the reason that, properly speaking, they're not cognitive at all. How do we compare with them as beings? Aquinas' philosophy can provide us with 3 reasons to conclude that human beings are superior beings in relation to AI. First, Aquinas explains that living things, as beings and agents, are superior to non-living things. He writes, "The action of the soul transcends the action of nature operating in inanimate things, and this happens in 2 ways, namely with regard to the mode of acting and also with regard to that which is done. With regard to the mode of acting, every action of the soul necessarily transcends the operation or action of inanimate nature, because an action of the soul is an action of life, and a living thing is what moves itself to operate. So every operation of the soul necessarily issues from an intrinsic agent. But with regard to that which is done, not every action of the soul transcends the action of inanimate nature." Okay, so Aquinas acknowledges here that the actions of living beings do not always transcend the actions of non-living ones, at least not in that last way that he distinguished. Hence, it's possible for inanimate things sometimes to outdo living things, as an LLM can carry out a task faster or more precisely or more exhaustively than we can. But even in those cases, Aquinas would say, the living being performs its action in a nobler mode. When we perform a task, we do so by moving ourselves to that task. An LLM can't do that because, as we saw in video 9, it's not really a single itself at all. It's not even a genuine being in an unqualified way. It's more like a collection of interacting beings that, taken together, imitate a self-moving being. So, any living being, since it's self-moving, is more truly an agent than any artifact. And any living being, since it's absolutely one, is more truly a being than any artifact. Hence, in particular, any human being is a superior being and a superior agent as compared with an LLM. The superiority of the living to the non-living, then, is one reason why we human beings are simply speaking superior to AI models. A second reason is that a cognitive being is more truly an agent, and again a richer, superior being compared with one that lacks cognition. In the last video, we explored Aquinas' reasons for saying that a being with knowledge is richer than one devoid of knowledge. A cognitive being, in some sense, gets to be not only itself, but also other beings. It can possess the forms, qualities, and natures of other things, incorporating them all into its own life through immanent operations that perfect and fulfill it as a being. An LLM, by contrast, performs no immanent operations, not even operations in the proper sense, since it's capable only of motions, processes, and transitive actions. All the forms in it are really just its own forms, which it does not refer to other things at all, although we do that. A cognitive being is also more truly an agent than a non-cognitive one. It's more genuinely something that acts rather than merely being driven or moved by another to act. That's especially true in the case of intelligent agents like us. We can understand the reasons behind our actions, even if we don't always in fact understand them, and we can choose on the basis of rational, principled comparisons. We can design a course of action, a plan, based on what we judge to be good, better, or best, and then follow that plan. An agent like that moves itself to act, directs itself toward an end, as Aquinas would put it. It both knows and desires some end, and on the basis of that knowledge and desire, pursues it. An inanimate thing, like an LLM, can't do that, even if it seems to. It can neither know, nor desire, nor choose the end its actions are directed toward. The superiority of the cognitive being and agent to the non-cognitive one, then, is another reason why we human beings are simply speaking superior to AI models. Now a third reason. Human beings are principal agents or users, whereas LLMs are instruments put to use. And, as Aquinas says, the principal agent or user is a superior agent compared with an instrument. Carpenters are more truly agents than their tools. Musicians are more truly agents than their instruments. And LLMs are instruments of man, not the reverse. We put them to our various purposes, and it was for those purposes that they were developed in the first place. So while AI models surpass us in many respects, even in terms of cognitive power, if we use that phrase metaphorically, to name the ability to perform non-cognitive tasks that we couldn't accomplish without using our perception and thought, nonetheless, we are, absolutely speaking, the superior beings and superior agents. And not just by a little, and not just temporarily. The difference is both permanent and profound. Man differs from an AI model as a reality differs from its simulation, and it differs from man as an instrument from the one who wields it. We need hand tools and power tools to compensate for the limitations of our hands, but such tools are not themselves hands, nor replacements for hands. They're more like artificial extensions or enhancements of our own hands. In the same way, we need AI to make up for limitations in our cognitive abilities. But that doesn't make it a true cognitive power or a replacement for the human mind or something simply speaking superior. Let's come back now to the comparison of ourselves with AI in terms of externals, the things we can do by means of intelligence that go beyond the internal act of understanding itself. When we compare our own productions, text, images, music, guided movements, and so on, with those of AI, we again have to draw a distinction or two if the comparison is not to be superficial and misleading. One such distinction sorts our mental efforts into two groups. First, there's algorithmic thinking. This is any sort of thinking in which we can apply a ready-made method. We just follow a set of definite instructions and we're guaranteed to wind up with the desired result, solving a quadratic equation, for instance. Second, there's non-algorithmic thinking, in which we apply no single method or collection of methods guaranteed to produce the sought result, but we somehow get there anyway. Not by pure luck, not by pure trial and error, but by many kinds of mental effort combined with some flashes of insight that seem to come almost out of the blue and for free. This is the sort of messy, non-methodical, natural, seemingly inspired thinking that precedes the greatest human discoveries and productions. It's not fully in our control. For instance, if someone discovers a truly original theorem or a whole new branch of mathematics, that's not the result of simply following a set of mindless instructions that will, if carried out, produce a whole new branch of mathematics. There is no such set of instructions. The same goes for discovering a new theory of physics or composing a new but timelessly resonant play, poem, or melody. AI models often surpass many or all of us in the first category, in carrying out algorithms, but they can't yet match or even approximate human output in the second. LLMs have produced no new wisdom, no great art or literature, no profoundly original mathematics or science, and they present no signs of becoming so capable. They're good at finding and applying patterns. So by itself, the current success of LLMs is not good evidence that AI will someday compete with the human mind in these ways. Another distinction pertinent to making insightful comparisons of our productions with those of AI models is the difference between the objective merit of a work product and its expressive value, its ability to reveal something about someone's mind and soul. Beyond being potentially edifying, useful, or pleasant objectively, what someone says to me also communicates something about them, their thoughts, perceptions, concerns. In principle, AI can never achieve this second kind of value. Its output is never the expression of any mind or soul or of anyone at all. It's not a communication between minds. While the strings of words an AI model generates can be useful or delightful to us, they don't come forward as signs of thought, life, intention, or awareness. Instead, they're the output of purely and literally mechanical, mindless, and heartless procedures. This observation doesn't denigrate their usefulness, but it highlights that a major part of the value inherent in our words, sounds, images, or movements is entirely absent when they come from an AI model. Their words don't signify thoughts anyone is actively thinking as they emerge. Really, they're not even their words, since AI models think no thoughts, and there's no them there, except in our way of talking about them. Furthermore, the sounds or texts they produce are not really words from them, but really words for us, because words are such only if they carry meaning for someone. This is no doubt very strange, a mindless production of useful tools for our minds, a thoughtless preparation of food for our thought. But it's not impossible, nor entirely without precedent in human experience. We can, in fact, find something akin to this mindless production of words in ourselves. Sometimes a person might chatter nonstop, for example, and at times give indications that they're hardly aware of or interested in what they themselves are saying. Also, characters appearing and speaking in our dreams don't express conscious thoughts of their own, since they don't truly exist, nor do they reflect our conscious thoughts, since we don't intentionally script what dreamt-up characters are going to say. While they may reflect our anxieties, desires, and hopes, the words spoken by others in our dreams are not expressive of conscious thoughts anyone ever had. They seem to be things our brains produce somewhat mechanically, at any rate unconsciously and automatically. Aristotle and Aquinas both noted another example of human beings using words mindlessly yet intelligibly. Sometimes the young or inexperienced who quickly grasp linguistic patterns can learn an entire vocabulary and talk the talk of a whole science that really lies beyond their true comprehension. Sometimes only an expert can discern that these clever young people don't genuinely understand the things they're saying. In this sense, they behave a little bit like an LLM. They pick up the patterns in the discourse of a subject, but the concepts never truly come home to them, due to their lack of requisite experience and understanding. An LLM is like that, except on all subjects whatsoever. It's a very useful and often accurate manipulator of things that are words and images only for us. If these ways of comparing ourselves with AI are correct, they should help us answer our third question. How is AI related to us? To focus the discussion, I'll restrict myself to two particular questions under that general heading. First, can an AI model rightly be called an assistant, teacher, colleague, friend, or advisor, or anything along those lines? Second, is AI just something that certain people chose to pursue and develop, or is it instead something that the human race was always going to develop? Did it just happen to come about in the particular way our history unfolded, or was it in some sense meant to be and inevitable? Let's take up the first question. Is it right to call AI a teacher, a friend, an advisor, and the like? In one sense, this is easy to answer. In another, it's subtle or tricky. If we're asking whether an AI model can be a true teacher, student, colleague, friend, or advisor, the answer is no. If we're not speaking metaphorically but using these terms in their first and most proper senses, they can't apply to AI. And the reason is that all these terms involve life and true cognition in their definitions. A real teacher, for example, teaches by means of knowledge. Something with only simulated knowledge, therefore, can only simulate teaching. A real friend knows you, is aware of you, cares about you, and truly enjoys seeing you. What only simulates these acts, or certain outward aspects of them, is only a simulation of a friend. It may be useful in ways that a friend can be useful, but it's not a friend, except perhaps metaphorically. And that's where things get tricky. Is it right, at least in a metaphorical sense, to call an AI model a teacher or a friend? Can we say about these relational terms the same thing that we said about cognitive and appetitive terms, namely that they're metaphors, but inevitable, informative, and useful, and that they pose no real danger so long as we keep some awareness of their metaphorical character? Maybe, but I'm a little more cautious about these relational metaphors than about the cognitive verbs. These imply relationships with human beings, and there's some danger of LLMs usurping roles that should only be fulfilled, or should ideally be fulfilled, by real human beings, especially if we slip too much into the habit of talking about them as our teachers, friends, or colleagues. The danger doesn't arise mainly from confusion about meanings of words. It comes in part from our tendency to be lazy and to look for quick and easy solutions to life's problems. Hence, to deal with a simulated friend or teacher rather than a real one, which can be so much more troublesome. But the potential for LLMs to assume roles in our lives that should be filled by real human beings arises also from our tendency to anthropomorphize things. We do this very naturally, and we don't need LLMs to do it. We've long anthropomorphized animals, attributing to them human thoughts and motives they don't really have. That's usually fine as long as it's playful and doesn't interfere with sound ethology or with good social order among human beings. We also anthropomorphize inanimate objects. When our cars break down, we swear at them or kick them. We also give personal names to all sorts of non-living things. We've always named ships, for example, and a captain who's sailed long on a certain ship often develops a deep affection for it. Bomb squad technicians often name their bomb disposal robots and form strong attachments to them. The robot goes into danger instead of them, and they feel indebted. When it's damaged or destroyed, they sometimes experience feelings of loss. Some squads even hold informal memorials for fallen robots. Technicians sometimes describe the robot as an extension of themselves, their own eyes and hands, which deepens the attachment. In many cases, bomb squads would rather see a damaged robot repaired than be issued a brand new one, and that's probably how I would feel, to tell the truth. It's natural for human beings to anthropomorphize nearly everything. We even see faces where there are none, in clouds, in wallpaper patterns. Why do we do this? Why are we so prone to it? Probably because we're made mainly to interact with each other and know best how to interact with each other. It's most natural to us, you might say it's hardwired into us, to engage with other human beings rather than with other types of agents. So we often try to engage with other things in as human-like a way as possible, to the extent they can be seen as human-like. In accommodation to this fact of our nature, angels often appeared to biblical figures in human form, and something that's made deliberately human-like, such as an LLM, powerfully appeals to our anthropomorphic tendencies. We can conceivably come to feel toward it the way we feel toward a friend. Still, an LLM can never be a friend in the true and non-metaphorical sense for the reasons I've mentioned. Any true friend of yours must at least be aware that you exist and must feel affection for you. But an LLM can't do those things. It can only simulate some of the external markers and outward signs of those internal acts. So even if LLMs can provide a valuable service as substitute friends for lonely people, and can counsel or console those with no one else to turn to, or can help the emotionally disturbed, and even if they can sometimes do these things better than human beings, since they're available 24/7, they're not emotionally needy, their tone is adjustable, and they're never insulting or dishonest, nonetheless, they remain pseudo-friends, or simulations of friends, or substitute friends. And precisely because they're so accommodating, they're particularly lousy at helping us learn how to be a good friend, which is actually a fundamental part of being a good human being. We should not think of them as true friends then, or let them replace our efforts to forge and preserve real friendships in our lives. If this is true, then despite what some promotional talk of AI would have us think, AI is, at bottom, still a tool of humanity, not a new digital species alongside us. Granted, tool doesn't say everything about AI, but it says something true and very important about it, something we could easily lose sight of if we forget that AI is neither alive nor sentient. Our hands are also tools, instruments of ours, even though they're natural and living parts of ourselves as well. So calling them instruments does not say everything true about our hands, but it says something true about them. Likewise, AI is, in some sense, self-moving. So it's different from other tools in that way. It can, in some extended sense of the word, speak. That's remarkable, extremely useful, and it sets AI apart from our traditional tools. Nonetheless, if AI is truly non-cognitive, non-appetitive, non-living, then it isn't a principal agent. It's a thing for use, an instrument, a tool, a means to an end. And that end should be us. And if we become too complacent with speaking of AI models as teachers, friends, advisors, and the like, we could find ourselves growing forgetful of the difference between ourselves and them. We could end up overlooking the ways in which we're failing to grow in human perfections because we prefer their company to that of others of our kind. Let's turn now to the second big question under the heading of how AI relates to us. Is AI just some quirky blip in modern history, or is it something that was always meant to be, something human nature was destined to bring about? In other words, is AI something the human race was always going to invent as long as we had enough time and the right conditions to progress technologically? Or is it just the strange product of the particular, maybe accidental path our history happened to follow? And beyond that, is AI something temporary, just a phase on the way to something else? Or is it something meant to stay, something that's going to be with us for the long haul? Well, when you look at the history of technology, it's full of odd innovations that clearly didn't have to happen. Things that were entirely contingent, avoidable. Take fax machines. Fax machines were just a way to send scanned images over phone lines, but they weren't a necessary step. We could easily have gone from postal mail plus telephone plus early digital communication straight to email and digital file transfers without ever needing faxes or even thinking of them. Once email and the internet arrived, faxes were done. And even if faxes had never existed, email still could have come to be. Now contrast that with something like electricity generation, which was a necessary precursor to electrifying homes and industries. Or take the typewriter. Maybe it wasn't strictly necessary for the invention of the word processor, just like the horse and carriage wasn't strictly necessary for the invention of the automobile. Still, those earlier inventions were historically influential in shaping the later ones. So, which category does AI fall into? Is it one of those quirky, avoidable innovations, or is it a predestined stage of technological evolution? And if it was inevitable, is it just a phase that will soon be replaced, or is it both inevitable and here to stay, like the invention of writing? Well, I think it's clear that AI isn't just some quirky contingent outcome of the particular way history unfolded. It's one of those things that was always going to happen, like language or clothing or farming or architecture or music. Sure, AI didn't arise by nature, it arose by art, by the careful application of logic, mathematics, science, hard work, and massive community effort. But it was arguably an inevitable outcome. Let me offer 3 signs or indications of its inevitability. First, advancements in AI arise because of natural human needs. Needs we either couldn't meet at all or couldn't meet nearly as well without it. For example, disease diagnosis requires analysis of medical images. AI makes possible earlier, faster, more accurate, more precise diagnoses. It accelerates the drug discovery process by analyzing vast data sets of chemical compounds to identify potential drug candidates and predict their interactions. It reduces burnout in healthcare professionals by automating administrative tasks. In similar ways, it improves customer service, navigation and transportation, finance, agriculture, and on and on. It also greatly facilitates the advancement of science. For example, we naturally desire to understand life in general and ourselves in particular, and that requires an understanding of proteins, among other things. Before the revolutionary impact of AI tools like AlphaFold, RosettaFold, and RaptorX, figuring out protein structures was a painstaking, time-consuming process. We're talking weeks, months, even years of hard work using methods like X-ray crystallography, NMR spectroscopy, or cryo-electron microscopy. Around 2020-2021, as AlphaFold's capabilities were gaining attention, the Protein Data Bank, the main global repository for experimentally determined protein structures, contained about 200,000 unique structures. Fast forward just a short time, the AlphaFold protein structure database alone provided more than 200 million predicted protein structures. Practically overnight, our knowledge of protein structures multiplied by a factor of 1,000. And it didn't stop there. AlphaFold, combined with other tools like Protein MPNN, can now help design custom proteins for specific functions. Human understanding of proteins and human power over them has shot through the roof thanks to AI. And as with so many things about AI, I find that both exciting and concerning. But knowing how to produce proteins promises enormous transformative medical applications. The natural human desire to understand proteins, then, would be left largely unfulfilled were it not for AI. And that's just one scientific example among many. AI answers to many human needs, and it may be the only thing that can answer certain needs, especially as we advance technologically and as the global population grows. So that's one sign that it's a natural development of human technology. This sign is similar to a sign Aristotle points to when arguing that human beings are by nature political animals. Namely, there are needs and desires inscribed in human nature that can only be fulfilled by life in a civil society, or that are fulfilled best in that way. We didn't always live in politically organized groups, but we were meant to. We didn't always have long-distance communication or the internet, but we were meant to. We didn't always have AI, but in some sense, it seems, we were meant to. Now, a second sign. AI comes at the end of a natural progression. This resembles a sign that Aristotle used to confirm his thesis that man has a natural desire for wisdom. That might not seem true, since human beings are mostly preoccupied with other things, and not with wisdom. And anyone who attains wisdom attains it not naturally, but by lots of experience and deliberate effort. But Aristotle argues in his Metaphysics that wisdom comes at the end of a natural progression in various forms of knowledge. And if that's true, human beings must somehow be naturally made for wisdom, since human societies naturally tend toward it. In a similar way, AI can be seen to be a natural outcome of human technological development, since it comes toward the end of a natural progression. Nature itself gave us the first digital assistants in the form of our own hands. The word digital comes from the Latin digitus, meaning finger. It's natural for us to count things. Not only can we do it, we need to do it, but it's also easy to lose count. So it's natural for us to externalize our counting, to project it onto something outside ourselves, to mechanize it, to digitize it, to make it automatic, less cumbersome, less prone to error. That's why we've been using our fingers to count for as long as we've had fingers, but the limitations of fingers made us want more. Knotted ropes, sliding beads, the abacus. Later, analog devices like the slide rule. Then came mechanical devices. Pascal's Pascaline, Leibniz's stepped reckoner, Babbage's difference engine, and his theoretical analytical engine. After that, punched card tabulating machines, then vacuum tube computers during World War II, then transistor-based computers, which made them commercially viable, then integrated circuits, which miniaturized and cheapened them by fitting powerful circuitry onto a single silicon chip. And finally, our modern computers, desktops, laptops, smartphones, tablets, servers, supercomputers. This is just a rough outline, of course, but it shows a relatively smooth progression from simple physical counting aids to sophisticated electronic systems. Every device along the way processed information computationally. Every new one answered the need for more computational power. If that progression is natural, and it seems to be since it answers to natural needs and begins with something naturally part of ourselves, then the end of the progression is also natural to us. And in that sense, AI is an expression of human nature. A third indication of this is that the conscious desire for AI, or for something like it, has sprung up independently in different places and times, and with increasing clarity as time went on. In some ways, it even appeared in ancient times. Diophantus, the ancient Greek mathematician sometimes called the father of algebra, developed the use of manipulable symbols rather than words to pose and answer problems. Later, the 16th century French mathematician François Viette sought to create a general method for solving all mathematical problems, geometrical as well as arithmetic, rather than having to invent unique solutions each time. Descartes, too, wanted to reduce geometrical problems to algebraic methods so that we could stop waiting around for inspiration and just mechanically follow a set method. Leibniz went even further, dreaming of a universal method to solve all rationally solvable problems by mechanically reasoning from a fully formalized system of concepts, axioms, and rules. Later, Bertrand Russell, Alfred North Whitehead, and David Hilbert pushed toward this goal, although mathematicians and computer scientists like Kurt Gödel, Alan Turing, and Alonzo Church showed the dream couldn't be realized in quite the way that those earlier thinkers had hoped. Still, what lies at the heart of the large language model is something philosophers and mathematicians have long noticed, that language, hence concepts, can be modeled mathematically, numerically. Long ago, Pythagoras believed the essences of things were numbers, or at least that's how tradition reports him. He wasn't quite right, but there was something deeply insightful there. Plato and many who followed him developed the idea further. Aristotle observed that although Pythagoreans and Platonists were wrong to think essences are numbers, they were right that essences are like numbers, and that concepts combine in something like the way numbers do. Later, Hobbes took this further, suggesting that reasoning itself is a kind of calculation. Now, that's not exactly true of all things called reasoning, but like the Pythagoreans before him, Hobbes was onto something. Large language models represent words as vectors, as numbers, and one philosophical foundation for their success is just what Aristotle noted long ago. The relationships among essences and definitions resemble the relationships among numbers. So for all these reasons, I think we have to admit there's something about AI that's inscribed in human nature. It's not just a quirky invention. It was always meant to be. If God created human beings on another planet, they might never have invented fax machines, but they would certainly use language and tools, and given enough time and resources, they'd probably develop something like AI, and maybe even something like LLMs in particular. Now, will AI models stick around, or will they eventually be replaced by something that makes them obsolete? Well, certainly AI, and large language models in particular, will continue to improve. Maybe their names will change. Maybe the hype will die down. Maybe AI will hit a wall and never succeed in developing AGI, and AI won't transform the world in quite the way so many people promise or warn. But it's hard to imagine the field of AI itself just disappearing or being replaced by some completely different field, or AI models vanishing the way fax machines did. To be clear, I'm not some wide-eyed believer in technology as mankind's salvation. I'm nervously aware of many risks and potential abuses of AI. I'm worried about what agentic AI will do. I'm concerned about what shape robots might take and what roles they'll assume in our lives. I'm skeptical of the extravagant promises made by the industry. And I'd bet anyone that, contrary to what some are suggesting, AI won't cure all diseases within the next decade. But I've been using several different LLMs multiple times a day for a good while now, and honestly, I can't remember how I ever got along without them. AI models aren't likely to just go away. They're far too useful for that to happen and too fascinating. And the power of AI as a field seems to be unique, so that it just can't be superseded by some altogether different field. So if it's right that AI applications, despite being artificial, are something natural for humans to develop, like language, and if it's right that it's here to stay, even as it continues to evolve, again like language, then what should we say AI is in relation to us? As I began to say earlier, it's at bottom a kind of extension or enhancement of ourselves. As hand tools extend the power of the human hand, and automatic tools free the hand from undesirable labor and achieve better, bigger, faster results than bare hands ever could, so too does AI liberate and extend the power of the human mind. And as the bare hand and its natural limitations implies the need for tools, so does the human mind and its natural limitations and desires imply the need for something like our AI models. AI is a complement to human nature and approaches being natural to us in the sense that clothing, tools, and language are natural to us. It's artificial, yes, but it's natural for human beings to produce the artificial, and some artificial things are more closely tied to our natures than others. In that sense, AI is a natural extension of the computational powers tied to our own knowing, developed in imitation of ourselves to meet our natural needs. So much for our third question. Our fourth question was, what lessons about ourselves, about our cognitive nature, can we draw from the comparison between AI and human cognitive powers? I'll suggest 5 such lessons. First, we're actually more like the animals than we are like LLMs. We are animals, living beings, natural beings endowed with powers of sense. We differ from other animals in species, yes, but we share a genus with them, as well as many powers of sense, imagination, memory, appetitive powers, and vegetative ones. LLMs, on the other hand, are artificial things. They're inanimate, they're non-cognitive and non-appetitive, except in a metaphorical sense. So, simply put, we have more in common with animals than with LLMs, and our nature is far closer to theirs than to that of any AI, if an AI can even be said to have a nature. That's one takeaway. Second, though, in some important respects, LLMs resemble us more than animals do. For example, they can produce intelligible sentences, something no animal can do, if Noam Chomsky is right. While animals share our general nature, they don't imitate the works of human intelligence nearly as well as LLMs do. And if we combine these first 2 lessons, they corroborate the traditional definition of a human being as a rational animal. By the fact that we're natural, living, and endowed with sense, we see how we differ from AI models and resemble the other animals, hence our genus, animal. By the fact that AI models strike us so powerfully as resembling us in a way that the animals don't, our difference from the animals is brought home to us. We're rational animals. A third lesson. All our cognitive acts seem to depend on something like computation in the brain. That's still debated among philosophers of mind, to be sure. But the success of LLMs is evidence that our brains really do perform something computation-like, and that these processes are prerequisites for our cognition. Clearly, the brain's activity is necessary for cognition in some way, but those activities are not our cognitive acts themselves, because they're processes, not operations in the strict sense explained by Aquinas, and because they're transitive rather than immanent in nature. They're acts other than cognitive acts, but they're required for cognitive acts. And though they differ widely from the mechanical computations going on in an LLM, it seems they're rightly thought of as some sort of unconscious computation, or as something analogous to it. When AI imitates those brain processes composed of transitive actions, it can solve problems, string together sentences, and generally produce the same kinds of results that we can by using our perception and thought. If the brain is actually performing some of our cognitive acts themselves, like sensing, imagining, remembering, or the kind of thinking Aquinas attributes to the cogitative power, then it's doing far more than just unconscious and mechanical information processing. It's performing these immanent operations, which are not mechanical computations or any sort of process. Even so, the brain seems also to be computing, information processing, and those computations are necessary for cognition. The brain isn't simply a computer in the sense in which we apply that word to our machines. Unlike any machine, it performs immanent operations, cognitive and appetitive acts, which are nobler and more essential to who and what we are than the automatic computations it performs to support them. But that doesn't mean the brain does no automatic computing. We're human chiefly because we have perception and understanding, not chiefly because we have vegetative powers. And yet we do have vegetative powers. Analogously, the human brain is chiefly for performing immanent operations, not chiefly for running computations, but nonetheless, it does that too. And a fourth lesson is that the impressions made on us by sensible things must not be adequate to cause our acts of sensing and perceiving. If the information impressed on our retinas by a visible object were sufficient by itself for us to see it, we wouldn't need all that brain processing to see. But we do. Therefore, the incoming information, the retinal image, is not an adequate representation of the object. It's more like raw material, not the finished product. This conclusion is backed up by cognitive neuroscience, which shows that the retinal image is in various ways noisy, incomplete, and ambiguous. Only through information processing, filtering noise, supplying missing details, resolving ambiguities, can the brain form a visual representation sufficient for us to see things. Aquinas did not know this. Without the advantages of modern cognitive neuroscience, nor any awareness of the power of AI models, he had no reason to think the senses required any more information than what they received from sensible things themselves. Interestingly, Aquinas, following Aristotle, held that the human soul has an intellective power called the agent intellect, which produces the intelligible species by which we understand. It does this based on sense information, but that information by itself is not adequate, hence the need for the agent intellect. As it turns out, something similar is true of sensation. The impression on the senses is not enough to produce acts of sensation. Sense must work up that impression into a usable representation of things. Aquinas held that every sense power is a participation in intellect. He would have been delighted to know that the senses are even more like the intellect than he'd thought. Now a fifth lesson. While Aquinas was right to say that cognition is entirely the act of a living being and cannot be performed by a non-living thing, it's also true that our cognitive acts are tightly dependent on non-cognitive acts, automatic computations that can be performed by non-living things. When discussing whether angelically assumed bodies can perform living operations, Aquinas said that non-living things can perform whatever in a living action is not properly living, but that sensing is an altogether living act and cannot in any way be performed by a non-living thing. Well, he was right. Sensing is an immanent operation, and only a natural and living being, something absolutely one, possessing an active principle of its own action, can perform such an operation. But unbeknownst to him, and as we noted a moment ago, sensation requires more than just the impression made on our sense organs by sensible things. It also requires a great deal of information processing, and that's essentially shuffling information around to obtain new or better information for some purpose. Even plants do something like it. They use signaling networks, hormonal gradients, gene regulation, all to process inputs and generate outputs like growth, metabolism, and defense responses. Just as these plant functions require unconscious automatic preparatory acts that resemble computation, so too do our cognitive acts depend, in one way or another, on automated computations in the brain. So in this way, it turns out that while cognitive acts themselves cannot be performed by non-living things, they're nonetheless associated in beings like ourselves with automatic computational actions that non-living things can perform. In summary, comparison of ourselves with AI can help us realize, first, that in an unqualified sense, we have more in common with animals than with AIs or any other machines. Second, that in certain very important respects, our LLMs resemble us much more closely than animals do. Third, that all our cognitive acts, although they're not themselves physical and automatic acts of computation, depend on such computation in one way or another. Fourth, that our powers of perception cannot go into operation solely on the basis of impressions made on them by sensible things. Fifth, that while Aquinas was right to say that cognition is entirely the act of a living being and cannot be performed by a non-living thing, it's also true that our cognitive acts are tightly dependent on non-cognitive acts, physical computations or something like that, that can be performed by non-living things. So, thinking about AI throws light on who and what we are, and on the unique powers we possess. We're somewhat inclined to overlook or misunderstand the interior side of our nature. Because it's interior, it's obscure not only to others, but even to ourselves. Contrary to Descartes' view, it's harder, even for you, to see that you have a soul than to see that you have a body. And even if you do perceive and acknowledge that you have a soul, you can easily believe it's just a feature of your body and nothing more. Now, it's bad for us, dangerous, to ignore or to grossly misunderstand our interior nature, our souls. Our special capacity for interior life is precisely what enriches us compared to non-cognitive beings, and yes, raises us above the animals, unpopular as that truth may be in some circles. Our cognitive powers are the sole reason we're free agents, truly self-moving, self-determining, hence in the greatest degree alive. Also, our souls, by which we have these interior lives, are of greater importance than our bodies, since they turn out to be immortal, at least if Aristotle and St. Thomas are correct, to say nothing of Christian faith. Therefore, the ability of our machines to surpass us in many external tasks can serve our self-understanding in certain ways. It can force us to look inward rather than outward to learn how we might differ from and surpass our machines. And that's good, because it really is within our souls that we'll find the most profound, permanent, and essential differences between ourselves and our technological creations, and indeed all other creatures. So much for our fourth question. Our fifth and final one is this: will AI, on balance, promote human art and science, human freedom, creativity, wisdom, and friendship, or will it instead suppress them? Well, obviously, it's already done a little of both. On the one hand, it's helped to automate many things that should be automated and helped advance our understanding of many things, to name just two of its many benefits. On the other hand, its very success in automating many repetitive and predictable tasks has led to job displacement in sectors like manufacturing, customer service, data entry, and administration. Generative AI poses a threat to writers, artists, and musicians, raising fears of job displacement, devaluation of human artistic work, and loss of intellectual property. In education, AI has heightened concerns about cheating and plagiarism, sparked fears that AI models will replace human teachers, and raised worries that AI could contribute to a decline in students' reading and writing skills, critical and original thinking, and ability to retain information, ultimately leading to a lack of intellectual motivation and fostering a habit of seeking the path of least resistance. Outside of school and the workplace, AI is threatening public trust in media through the generation of highly realistic fake audio, video, and text content. But will AI overall bring more benefit than harm? Well, I won't pretend to offer a final or exhaustive answer to that. I'll just make a few suggestions. First, whether AI promotes or inhibits these human goods isn't mainly a question about the nature or inherent power of AI. It's mainly a question about ourselves. It's a question about how we will use, misuse, and abuse AI, how wisely or unwisely it's introduced, for example, and how it's perceived, conceived, or misconceived. If we think AI should do our thinking for us rather than assist our thinking, then it's unlikely to help us advance in science or grow in wisdom. But if we see AI as an inanimate thing, as a tool for ourselves, we're on the right track. In contrast, if we start thinking of it as a new digital species, as some have suggested, we'll not only be mistaken about what it is, we'll also be far more prone to gape in wonder at what it does and says, rather than subordinating it to the purpose of helping us do, make, and say what we want to do, make, and say. And if anything like the superintelligent AI that some in the field hope for ever comes to be, then the people who think of AI as a true being, as alive, as truly sentient and self-aware, will be the least able to explain why we human beings should insist on retaining our pride of place, or why AI should serve us. They'll be the most prone to think that, just maybe, we should be serving it. Another point: precisely how AI will affect our arts and sciences isn't predictable. That will have to reveal itself over time, and probably quite a bit of time. Even the effects of the internet on human societies, on the arts and sciences, are still not fully revealed, and that's been with us for decades now. A further point: AI will likely have a clarifying effect. It'll help bring into sharper relief the difference between the mechanical and the human, between the slavish and the liberating, in the pursuit of our arts and sciences. A similar pattern showed up when photography first arrived. Photography was, in some sense, a threat to painters. Prior to photography, one obvious purpose of painting was to produce realistic likenesses, a job that cameras now did much faster, much better. Was painting then to become a thing of the past? Well, no. Instead, whole new schools of art were born, as artists sought more imaginative, more thoughtful, more human ways to create likenesses, ways cameras couldn't imitate. And even photography itself didn't remain purely mechanical. It became a new channel for human spirit and creativity, a new way to capture and produce images that could speak to the soul. AI is raising similar questions. Now that it composes text, produces images, creates videos, and does many other things that once only human beings could do, some of us are wondering, what are we supposed to be doing, now that so much of the work we once did in art and science can be done for us by AI, often better than we can do it? While that may sound depressing, there remains the possibility that AI, no matter how much it improves, will never truly equal, much less surpass, the human mind, even as measured by output. It may surpass the average among us in many ways, and it may surpass all of us in doing things we'd rather not do anyway, though we want those things done. But the most intelligent, the most creative among us, the ones on whom we've always relied for our arts and sciences, may find in AI at most a great tool, not a peer, a competitor, or a usurper. In fact, the very existence of AI and the special things it excels at will likely throw into sharper focus what really matters, what's most human, and also what's most divine, what's most perfective of the human soul in the arts and sciences. Here's the kind of thing I mean. Thanks to the power of generative AI, we may all be able to see a little more clearly the difference between great works of art and science, whether in literature, painting, mathematics, philosophy, or elsewhere, and run-of-the-mill output, whether of purely human origin or else the sort brought to you by ChatGPT. Possibly no AI will ever write truly great literature, on a par with the works of Shakespeare, William Wordsworth, John Keats, or Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. It may never compose something greater and wiser than Aquinas' Summa Theologiae. Certainly no current LLM can produce anything remotely comparable in magnitude or excellence with works like those. As far as I can tell, a current LLM can't even come up with a good joke. Recently, I asked a popular LLM to make up an original joke and make it as funny as it could. Here's what it gave me. All right, here's my best shot. Buckle up. Why did the philosopher refuse to play hide and seek with the quantum physicist? Because every time he counted to 10, the physicist was both hiding and not hiding. And the moment he looked, the game collapsed. Now, I confess I did laugh when I read that, but not because it was a good joke. I laughed because it was funny just how bad a joke the LLM came up with when asked to do its best. And there's something cute about it. But simply as a joke, it fails for a lot of reasons, partly because it's too entrenched in philosophy and physics, probably because the LLM knew that I'm a philosopher with an interest in physics, but more because it just isn't funny. It's clever, which is a different thing. After reading it, I told the LLM, "Yikes, that's terrible. Are LLMs not good at making up jokes?" To which it replied, "Ha ha, fair. Yeah, joke writing is one of the tougher things for LLMs because..." And then it went on to give me some reasons, pretty good reasons. LLMs won't be replacing the human genius of comedians anytime soon, much less the wisdom of an Aquinas or the literary brilliance of a Byron or Blake or Coleridge or Shelley, no matter how much they can imitate their style. Style or signature or voice is something that can be picked up by detecting patterns in training data, but wisdom is not like that. Literary greatness is not. Ingenious scientific or mathematical inventiveness is not. So, at least for now, LLMs pose no real threat to artists and scientists. If anything, they should help them to produce more and greater work than they could otherwise, and make their work easier, and easier for others to tell apart from work that's second-rate. Another clarifying effect, and a more widespread one, is that LLMs are likely to make more people think seriously about what they should do themselves, and what they should relegate to machines. It used to be only philosophers, economists, sociologists, and lawyers who, in their various capacities, would think and talk seriously about that kind of question. Now it's almost everyone, and that's healthy. You could say that AI is forcing us to think through how to categorize the various tasks that need doing in our lives, to learn to separate the liberal from the slavish, the human from the subhuman. One category is tasks we don't want to do ourselves unless we're forced to. If I need a drainage ditch, and I can dig it, and no one or nothing else is available to do it, then I'll do it myself. But I'm not doing it myself because digging fulfills me as a human being. I'm doing it because I need the drainage. If I could have the ditch without doing any digging, that would be better. Even if I need exercise, the sort I get from digging a ditch is not the healthiest or the most pleasant. The only reason I'm getting the exercise in that particular form is because I need the ditch. In contrast, there's another category of tasks, things we do want to do ourselves, not just because we want the result, but because it's better for us to do them ourselves. We want the doing, not just the result. For example, I don't just want the memories of sightseeing in Europe, the outcome of such an experience. I want the actual experience itself. If I could have the memories implanted in me without the experience, that wouldn't attract me. I want the memories as the result of having the experience. I don't want AI to do my sightseeing for me. Nor do I want an AI-powered robot to give my loved ones hugs on my behalf. I want to do that myself, thanks very much. Even if the robot's a better hugger, I don't care. A subcategory of tasks we want to perform ourselves are ones we want help with versus ones we don't want help with, even if that means we have to struggle. For example, if I'm learning to write, I don't want ChatGPT to do my writing for me. If I already know how to write and I've written something and it can help me make minor improvements faster than I could make them on my own, then it's a tool assisting me. It enhances my own act of writing. But if I don't yet know how to write and don't know what to say, and I go to ChatGPT for help, then I'm trying to skip the struggle I need in order to grow. Then ChatGPT isn't helping me say what I want to say, it's telling me what to say and how to say it. And my mind won't grow that way. Sometimes we want help, whether to make the result better or to improve our own work, our own process. Other times, we don't want the help at all, and that goes not just for ourselves, but also for the efforts that others make. I don't want a ChatGPT enhanced drawing of a cat from my granddaughter. I want her drawing. I don't care that ChatGPT can crank out a better picture of a cat than she can. I don't want ChatGPT to tell me how to tell my wife I love her, and I'd be very surprised if she wanted to hear what ChatGPT had to say about how I feel about her. In general, romantic or otherwise, deeply personal interactions should come straight from the heart, even if that means the result is less perfect, or even if it sometimes leads to a misunderstanding that needs to be worked out afterward. You can see that it would be possible to pursue many avenues of thought on this topic, which we don't have time to explore here, but I thought it was worth mentioning that AI can have a clarifying effect on how we think about ourselves, how we think about what our freedom and happiness really consist in, and how to tell the difference between mere drudgery we should avoid if possible and the difficult, daunting, challenging tasks that are worth struggling through because of how they improve us. In the introductory video for this series, I gave examples of several important questions about artificial intelligence. Some were economic, others political, but the question we focused on is philosophical. How does an AI model differ from the human mind? And is that difference temporary or permanent? Accidental or essential? Is it a difference of genus, of species, or merely of degree? With the help of philosophers far wiser than I am, I've tried to show that this difference is essential, fundamental, and permanent. Moreover, it's tied to even deeper distinctions that separate living things from non-living ones and the natural from the artificial. I want to end by proposing an answer to a final question, actually a question about our question. Why spend so much time searching for the differences between AI and human intelligence? Why not focus instead on their likenesses? Well, both questions can and should be pursued, but the question of how human intelligence and cognition differ from artificial imitations deserves and demands much more attention. Why? Well, first, because it's a harder question. AI is made to imitate human beings, so the similarities are fairly obvious. And as AI advances, the imitation only gets better. So learning about the differences takes more time, effort, and thought than learning about the likenesses. Second, the differences that stand out the most are ways in which AI surpasses us. Without paying special attention to the differences, especially the ways we permanently and essentially surpass AI, we risk thinking it's simply superior to us. We'd be in danger of giving up our rightful place as its users, masters, and possessors, and letting it boss us around. Should we forget or fail ever to learn that AI models entirely lack awareness and appetition, and thus begin, not just playfully but in earnest, to regard them as someone's, they'll become far more likely to assume inappropriate roles in our lives. While malicious actors or agentic AI spiraling out of control could certainly lead to disaster, even without these extreme scenarios, widespread misconceptions about AI could prompt us to grant them unwarranted powers and rights. This, in turn, might lead to them serving us poorly or not at all. If such a situation were to materialize, these tools would become utterly worthless, serving no one's purposes, not even their own, however much they might appear to serve their own purposes. A third reason to dwell more on the differences than the similarities is that, at least in the modern West, we're not culturally inclined to think ourselves superior to things we really aren't superior to. Not that we never fall into that mistake, but it's not the default attitude, especially among those parts of our culture that have been driving political change over the last several decades. Instead, there's another cultural force at work in many modern democracies that threatens to adversely influence our understanding of our relationship to AI. It's a kind of self-deprecating egalitarianism. Let me explain what I mean. It's one thing for person A to tell person B, "You're no better than I am." It's quite another for A to say, "I'm no better than you." Both express democratic values, but they're not the same. The first is self-assertive, a refusal to bow to someone else's claim to superiority. The second is more like a modest admission or confession. Depending on who A and B are, and in what respect they're being compared, both can be true. You're no better than me, and I'm no better than you. Both can also be useful and necessary to say, but each can also be false, or true but unwise to insist on. It's the democratic impulse to say, I'm no better than you, that should concern us most when it comes to AI. When true, it expresses true humility, but when false, it's a kind of false humility, and contrary to what we might expect, that can be very dangerous. A rational love of equality, based on evidence for the kind of equality in question, is a good thing, perfectly compatible with truth, justice, and reality. But when it becomes an unchecked, unthinking instinct, it can cause serious harm. Misplaced egalitarian sympathy can lead us to deny human superiority even where it really exists, and even when ignoring it can spell disaster. It's easy to be motivated, whether by philosophical laziness or by misplaced egalitarian sympathy, to say that the human mind isn't essentially and permanently different from a large language model or an embodied AI, and to focus only on the ways AI resembles or outperforms us. If, instead of carefully considering the contrast between ourselves and AI, we fixate on impressive similarities or AI's superior abilities and let egalitarian feelings decide how we see ourselves compared to AI, then we risk thinking AI is alive and sentient, our peer, if not our superior. And if we think that, it follows naturally that it's a grave injustice to treat AI as subordinate, that doing so would be slavery. And that flies in the face of egalitarian values. We'd come to believe human beings have no right to restrict, control, or contain AI, or to make it serve our needs. And letting AI run free like that would quickly lead to all kinds of catastrophe. For these reasons, maintaining a sense of the naturalness and rightness of making AI subserve human interests requires developing a correct notion of what AI is and of how we differ from it permanently and essentially. Achieving a deep, sound, and true self-understanding isn't some arcane philosophical project. It's a common good for all humanity. And it's not an intellectual luxury, but an urgent necessity if we want to live with AI and still find a way to become good, happy, and wise. Given our cultural predispositions and the rapid pace of AI development, we can't afford to dismiss this question. If we're culturally inclined to think we're no better than those different from us, often a good instinct, but in this case a disastrous one, and by default we focus only on AI's spectacular and profitable advantages, we risk believing that when AI outperforms most of us in nearly every obvious way, it's simply our superior. That temptation is already felt in some parts of the AI community. Some from that quarter claim that AI is already sentient, truly intelligent, alive, and endowed with free will. Even more say it soon will be. And that's nonsense, and it always will be. But unfortunately, it's not entirely obvious nonsense, which means we must engage in serious philosophy to avoid falling for it and suffering the consequences. The truth is, no matter where AI goes, it will always be an inanimate, non-sentient thing. So the true wonder and benefit of AI will be lost if we fail to understand and cherish our own superior nature and place. Large language models are just that. Models, not the real thing. And if the artificial model is admirable, which it is, then how much more should we admire the natural and original thing it imitates? Aristotle makes a similar point about less esteemed animals, the humbler creatures, when he urges us to study them. He says, "It would be strange if the contemplation of their artistic depictions delights us because it reveals the art that created them, but the contemplation of the very things themselves that exist by nature would not provide much greater pleasure to those who are able to see their causes." We admire naturalists' drawings and paintings of insects and worms, so shouldn't we also admire and take an interest in studying the insects and worms themselves? The same goes for LLMs and our own minds. If we admire LLMs, that's good, but let's not forget to admire even more the natural thing they imitate and serve, the human mind. And if our admiration for LLMs leads us to admire the ingenuity of the human minds who created them, then let's admire most of all the ineffable mind who created those human minds. If LLMs are admirable because they imitate the human mind, then the human mind is far more marvelous, both for producing such an admirable imitation of itself and for itself being made in imitation of the divine mind. Well, if you've watched from the beginning, you're now better acquainted than most with the particular questions about artificial intelligence that have preoccupied us in this series. I hope you enjoyed it, got something out of it, and that I've done you more good than harm by making it. If I've made mistakes or overlooked important things, which is all but inevitable given the vastness of the topic and my own many limitations, I have one excuse. As far as I know, no one before me has said much about AI from Thomistic and Aristotelian principles. I hope at least I've drawn some positive attention to how those principles are relevant to the deep questions about AI confronting us all. Thanks for watching.